So let's get into the components and framing up how the products that make up Admin Suite really enable you to get more out of the system and add additional functionality. And so why did we create these products? So I talked a little bit about solving common problems. Well, the other thing that we've noticed in being a WebCenter partner all these years is that although WebCenter is a great system, does a lot of things well from a content management perspective, we still noticed that there were feature function gaps, and customers would bring their problems with trying to solve some of these feature function gaps to us. And so from that, we developed the software that we're going to talk to you about. We've also seen that as customers try to customize WebCenter, they might not have a lot of in-house development skills to do that. So they're looking for some help to build custom components or do some custom component development. And so as we heard that feedback, we thought that was another opportunity to develop software, again, purposefully built for those problems. And then overall, as you look at getting access to content in the system, users still struggle with that if they have complex security models and doing the various mappings from their user directory to WebCenter. That's still problematic. And just giving visibility, another touch point, another way to make visible what content exists in the system and targeting that to users that might find it relevant and can use it to do their jobs. As well as workflow. So there's one of the strong capabilities of WebCenter is that as a workflow engine, and not a lot of customers actually take advantage of that. And if they do, the ones that we've worked with, they can really start to automate business-driven processes and drive their business forward and make it more efficient by using workflow to enable some of those processes. And then it's just getting content into the system. So WebCenter includes many different ways to do that, but we still see customers struggle from a large batch perspective and integrating content from other data sources into the system. And then really as you think about content and how it enables users to do their jobs, share information, have the right level of information, content management can really help with that. So from an overall onboarding perspective, if users can't quickly find what they need to do, what they need to know to do their jobs, it delays that onboarding and overall engagement process right from the start. So from those challenges we've seen and problems we've identified, we've built these 4 products that you see here, and we've packaged them up into a very attractive, from a very attractive price point and kind of packaged offering called Fishbowl's Admin Suite. So we're going to, as I mentioned, we're going to cover each one of these today. Advanced User Security mapping, really helps organizations map and control user access to content. So the information in a user directory, LDAP, Active Directory, taking that information and doing some mappings between that user information to WebCenter to ensure the right level of access to content. Subscription Notifier, really giving users of WebCenter visibility into the content that exists in the system, reminding them that content is about to expire, that they have to review content and take action so that they can update a policy or procedure that needs to be updated and shared across the organization. Workflow Solution Set, just enhancing and making it a little bit easier to get started with workflows by being able to customize the emails that get sent out with a workflow, or customizing the workflow review frames, and adding more functionality that as customers are using workflows, they find it a lot easier to use and more efficient from a workflow perspective. And then Enterprise Batch Loader. I mentioned there's many different ways to load content into WebCenter. Enterprise Batch Loader really excels as that component that can mass or batch load content into the system and take some of that content that exists in other systems, such as ERP systems, convert it to the necessary file format to get it into WebCenter and do those check-ins for you. So that kind of frames up today's discussion with a little overview of each component. For now, a deep dive into each one of those components, I'm going to turn it over to Jerry.
Thanks, Jason. Well, let's kind of kick things off by starting with Advanced User Security Mapping, affectionately called AWESOME. And this is a very popular product and portion of our admin suite. And it basically bridges the gap between Web Center content security and your enterprise security model and solves a lot of those business problems, tech problems that Jason was mentioning earlier. It's the only out-of-the-box supported solution to integrate Web Center content with third-party single sign-on products as well. And it also extends that LDAP 80 integration so you can interpret additional directory information such as attributes, organizational units, and group memberships to help define that access. AWESOME also enables users to delegate and elevate user capability to sub-administrators and import and export rules. So there's 5 key areas that we're going to talk about in our slide deck here before we demonstrate how AWESOME works. And they are directory configuration, which is where a large number of situations pop up with LDAP groups that are getting out of hand and unwieldy in your organization, and default mapping to those LDAP groups. Control and ownership, be it an IT security team versus an application owner versus a Web Center content admin. Troubleshooting issues with content access. Sometimes there's administrative difficulty in finding out and triaging why I could not get at the content I was supposed to get at. And improving new user provisioning and some initial inefficient setups and configuration we've seen with our customers have reported back to us that say, I've had trouble onboarding new employees. And last but not least, auditing user access, so you can find out who has access to what content. And these are the problems that we go after with solving them from a Web Center Advanced User Security Mapping perspective. We have some key considerations to highlight here. So we do some comparisons over each of these 5 key areas from a pure out-of-the-box LDAP integration perspective to an Advanced User Security Mapping integration perspective. And the first and the main purpose of this project is allow those conditional additional grants and removals or denials of the content server user roles and accounts and aliases. So if you're familiar with the content server security model, you have groups, roles, and accounts, and the intersection of those 3 make up the accessibility I have as a user to get at my content. And you can use a combination of those 3 to get the granularity you desire in your environment. But what happens is, a lot of times at the LDAP mapping from LDAP to the content server using the @ group name _R, RW, RWD, and so forth, tends to generate a lot of different LDAP groups. So that main problem proliferates, and if you take, say, 50 different groups that you might use, multiply that by 4 to get the right combination of access you need, you've got 200 LDAP groups that you have to populate resources into to make that security model work. It's quite a bit of IT overhead and quite a bit of a challenge from a triage perspective. We automatically sync information between Advanced User Security Mapping and LDAP as well, so the user information between the directory and the content server is synchronized to require that you ensure up-to-date data information is retrieved by the user and the access is capable and extendable to that user. Synchronization can be driven either by users in the content server, database, or LDAP server, and can be scheduled or on demand. I'll actually illustrate how that on demand works later. A key best practice recommendation from our perspective is also trying to use attributes in your LDAP repository more so than you can in more granular groups. The idea of doing that is if you take that 50 example and you multiply it by the 4 read, write, deletes, you get 200 groups you have to maintain. If you can maintain a small number of groups, say less than 10, and use them as true roles such as a contributor or reviewer for that department of that business and use department of business as an attribute, we can evaluate that attribute that they belong to as part of the rule for Advanced User Security Mapping to make it easier to manage the total cost of ownership of your security access. I'll illustrate that in our demo here today. Second in our list is the access control. So in our second point regarding this, we have situations where granting or blocking access to content in most organizations requires a change within an LDAP directory, which means the process might unfold such as a ticket would get opened and possibly via the help desk, and which in turn moves into the IT security team. The IT security team will then validate what groups the user has access to by looking at their AD. They might contact the user and ask them which content they're prevented from viewing, and also email the primary approver or owner of those groups to validate who should have access to what. This might involve eventually the content server administrator at some point, who happens to be would expect to be the most knowledgeable individuals who knows who has access to what content. Such a request could take hours, days, weeks, depending on the complexity of your security model and your procedures and processes for triaging and resolution. These are lengthy periods of time, and they can tend to bog down satisfied users and your overall adoption of your content server. Advanced User Security Mapples enabled content server administrators to manage user access with rules, which in turn manages the content and the people that have the access to the content. So it's a matter of where that line is going to be drawn in your organization. Provisioning through IT security and managing content and secure access through the content server and business people who know it. The main issue to take away here is security is a provisioning role, and we're trying to put the accessibility and the true ownership of the content access in the right person's and individual's hands so that you can respond quicker when there are issues and people are either realigned or not in the right place. Because people do move within your organization, and if you are moving within your organization, you need to request and deny access, in some cases rather quickly. And so those rules are manageable on the fly to prevent those and help those situations. From a troubleshooting perspective, there's always, I take that example I mentioned a little bit earlier, that the one major problem that does come up when you are trying to triage those issues is that you have to ask the user, in some cases, what their security access is. If I'm an IT security person and I'm responding to a ticket, I might end up calling that user, and the main problem that might pop up is, can you send me a screenshot of the profile page where your security access is? One, they might not know that. Two, if they do know that, now they have to interrupt the user to tell the security team what security access I have. That does not sound like a very nice problem, situation to be in. So alternatively, if we can provide a method for you to evaluate those permissions and put those permission ownerships down to the level that you feel are manageable by a business owner, or what you might call a super user or sub-admin type person, we can extend that evaluation process to help the triaging, which helps reduce the tickets, which helps to, most importantly, trigger access to the content and improve the user adoption and not get your users into a frustrated state of ownership. Adding new users, this one pops up quite a bit that we've heard from our customers in this third scenario. They said it can be a bit of a challenge to do this. And so kind of, if you think back to how this situation might be rolling around in your environment, how many times have you seen where a new resource starts and there are inevitably issues getting access to things they need to do their job? Not just access to the content, but maybe access and provisioning to other systems. So that can be a bit challenging. That doesn't leave a good impression on newly onboarded employees. And if you're like Fishbowl and our value, our continuous improvement core value, you look for ways to try and make the necessary adjustments to improve those situations. Another example is there might be times you want to refresh user attributes on demand instead of waiting for them to be refreshed later. So depending on how often you set up your refresh schedule, you can do an on-demand synchronization to get my new roles and privileges assigned immediately, and then schedule that on an ongoing basis. And last but not least, I'm going to talk about the auditing user access. So there's a scenario where you need to audit access every so often. If you don't, you probably don't have a very complex security model at this time, but we have many customers who share in this complex security model. And there's a feature called Retrieve User Access, which can be done in a number of combinations. It can be done by security group, it can be done by account, and it can be done by search within security group and account to return back the results of who has access under that security consideration. By security group, there's a drop-down box that will list all the security groups that the current logged-in user has access to. So it is context-aware, if you will, of who you are when you're doing this evaluation. You will not see all the security groups or all the security accounts that are enabled in the system. you'll only see the ones you have access to. So if you're a sub-admin or a super user, you'll be at one level of the security model, and you can look down as you're triaging issues and providing user access report for who has access to your content. You can also look by permission level. It's a drop-down box as well that lists the read, write, delete, and admin access permission level that that user might have in that combination of security model access. That button, as we'll show in the demo, will demonstrate where that can show that process working, so the casual user who does not have admin access can evaluate the security access. I'd also like to note that you can export these findings from this report to Excel for sharing those results in a reporting fashion. And I'll also illustrate, we won't demo this, but we can demo this at a one-off if you'd like, or a customer's perspective. We can take a combination of advanced user security mapping and subscription notifier through an admin suite and generate a security information report that automatically would be sent out in terms of what access they have and even what sample content they might have access to. So that helps give you some point in time and some real-time results as about who has access to what information. So let's talk about a brief look at what's new in Release 8.0. If you do not have 8.0 and you want to get it, I'd suggest you get a hold of support as soon as possible. It's got some nice new features in it. But we continue to enhance Awesome as we go with additional features and feedback from customers who are using the product live in their environments. Version 8.0 was released in December 2016. And we list a few of the items here, which we allow rules to be exported and imported, which are very helpful in new development situations. You can test out the rule in dev and push it to your upper environments, or vice versa if you're trying to repurpose different environments. You can allow sub-administrators to evaluate user permissions. Those examples I was talking about earlier. We redesigned the rules interface to create and modify rules. And it's also, like Jason mentioned, certified under 12C and 11G. So what I'm going to show you in a demo, I'll show you a brief little snippet of how Awesome works, the user interface page, and how its configuration might work under a couple different scenarios, how assigning security based on rules works, troubleshooting content access, and auditing user access. So I'm going to flip over between my environments here. And what you're going to see is our Show Me Content demo site. And all of our products, just so you're aware, are under the Fishbowl administration, so you can tell what you have installed in your environment if you're not aware. All of our products are accessible here as well through the component manager to manage configurations for them if the component has configurations that are manageable by you. The first one we'll hit is Advanced User Security Mapping and Defining the Rules. So this is the Rules UI for managing the multitude of rules you might define in your environment. There's really no limit of rules that you can manage within Advanced User Security Mapping, but I will say as you create the rules, they are evaluated top to bottom in that order. You can move them around by drag and drop with a simple little interface like this, and I can enable, edit, copy, or delete my rules. I'll open up a few and talk about the first couple in the list here. So this first example grants a contributor role by group. We evaluate the role type of attribute of group. AD group contributor is the defined attribute here, and our role is contributor, and our legal read-write is the account access that we are granting people in this group to the content that's in the content server. So your content would need to be tagged with the right legal account as well as part of your contribution process. I can test the rule out by going through the evaluation process, and it will tell me what rule access I've been given access to, and I can do that for all of my rules throughout my process. I can also do an evaluation by the user. In this case, I'm doing with a Sales 1, and I have denied access to a Department 1 read-only. So I can deny as well as grant access through my rule evaluation. And in order to create, In order to get the benefit of rules that have multiple attributes assigned to them, you can concatenate things together on a single rule to apply them to multiple people who might be, in this case, a user department of finance, and I can grant access to a multitude of roles that I type into this text box or pull from my predefined content server role list. I can add a number of accounts and varying degrees of privileges on the rule as well, or pick them from my defined accounts. And I can also add aliases that I might want these individuals in the finance department to have access to when dealing with workflow, for example. And I can pick them from my defined content server alias list as well. So in one rule for the entire finance department, I can grant all those privileges for them to do their job within the finance department, which cuts down the number of groups that all the individuals have to be put into on the LDAP repository side of things. I can delete a rule if I don't like the one I've created or if I didn't finish one, and it will clear that rule out of the list. So let me take you over to and show you what an example of that looks like. So I have a Sales Demo 1 user. When I look at their profile page, they have access to the following roles and they have access to the following accounts. In one scenario I mentioned earlier, there was the Department 1 that I was denying that person access to. So I'm going to go back, I'm going to execute that role, and this role that I have here, or this rule that I have here says I'm deny right now, but I'm going to flip it over to grant, and I'm going to save the rule, and I'm going to run my initiation process to retag that so I can sync up with my rule definition. And then as I refresh the page and come back to the sales demo individual, that the new department was granted access to advanced user security mapping. So now I have that as part of my process, and I can, in this case, look for a file. This particular asset has been tagged with the security of Department 1, so only people with Department 1 access can see it. This user was granted access, and when I go back and take that access away through the rule denial, and just repeat the opposite of what I did, deny access to that, save the rule, and run my initiation again to get the update out there, because I want it on demand at this point. When I come back and I run that same test again, I will not have access to that document that was tagged with Department 1. So that's just a quick demonstration of how the different rules can be managed and maintained within the content server and provide access through attributes, group mapping, or OU mapping versus an LDAP. There's also, I can perform the evaluate user permissions that I performed while I was in the rule at any time. This is an admin function. And I can even evaluate those rules and those steps within those rules to see how they were ordered and what the user was finally given access to when all the rules have been applied. The retrieve user access feature is the one I mentioned that allows you to look for all users who have access to various security groups, accounts, and the permission levels within that combination of those lookup values. It brings back the username, the full name, the email address, and the permissions of that, and allows you to download that file to Excel and share that with other individuals. I can get a different set of results if I look by security group versus account, depending on what your security model is. And again, it repeats all the individuals who have this combination of access. That same feature is available to a user who might be semi-power user or sub-administrator, if you will. So I can retrieve user access on behalf of my department or my group. And these are only the accounts and only the groups that I have access to that I can perform this lookup on. So now I can triage my finance department who has read access to the finance department account. And you'll notice that the retrieve user access is the only option I see versus an administrator who sees all the options. All right, let's flip back to our presentation. Let's jump into Subscription Notifier. In a nutshell, Subscription Notifier enables organizations to build out business rule-based content tracking and extends upon the notification expiration features of Oracle WebCenter content. These rules are easy to build using a friendly API or UI, just like we saw in the Advanced User Security Mapping. And a part of these rules include sending email notifications to users for review, updates, and when new revisions have been checked in or when content is set to expire. Subscription Notifier is much more than just a rule-based content notification system and engine. It also has the ability to invoke side effects. So we started with it under the notification model, but customer interaction over the course of the years has evolved this product to allow us to use this feature called side effects. An example of where side effects might be used would be the ability to send items into workflow, asking users to update content, archive it, or delete it. So when you hit the subscription notification, you might get a notification that says, yes, you're about to expire, but you also want to move into the next step and move that into workflow. Some of the problems that we tend to attack from a subscription notifier perspective are around, a lot of ones we hear are around gen www, getting stuck, or items getting stuck in done during the conversion process. So this leads to help desk and admin calls and frustrated users. And so we can get notifications and engage these items through the conversion process. We've also heard and seen statistics at how fast content is growing in organizations. So as you are merging terabytes and terabytes of content throughout your organization, but the key issue in managing that content is ensuring that the most relevant information gets shared. You might be using a repository for thousands and millions of items, but every day there's new relevancy to those individuals who are managing that content and looking for the key things they need to do their job. If we look at an example of content on a website, it could be an intranet, it could be an internet site. Companies continue to be challenged with knowing what content needs to be updated and by whom. Not knowing this, the process of updating this outdated content does not get done, leading to poor site performance and adoption. And you just end up with a bunch of link farms and content that isn't relevant to my day-to-day activities. We see that companies are also struggling to provide key stakeholders with timely content that they need to do their jobs. And a lot of times the content that gets created in your organization is done so in somewhat of a vacuum, where departments are not well connected and multiple locations across your organization make it difficult to know what high-end value content there is that's being created. And we all have a million things going on, lots of things going on. I am guilty of that as well. And so without knowing that a piece of content or collateral exists or perhaps unable to find it, you'll see multiple people creating the same asset or referencing an out-of-date version. So you'll get many duplications throughout the process, and the wasted time is even difficult to comprehend. Other challenges we see people facing are not including having enough forewarning or the inability to easily track when content is close to expiring, even if you are using the expiration feature, or needs to be updated at this time. Furthermore, organizations aren't always sure who the content owners or reviewers are for an item, so they can't really systematically put a process around how to proceed with content updates, and instead perform them in an ad hoc fashion, possibly causing inefficiencies and lost time and duplication again. Those are just some of the content problems we see that SubNod is solving over the course of the years it's been around. So SubNod as a tool has three major features. There are sub-features within each of these. They basically focus on sending emails to users on a scheduled basis. So we have an email notification engine that ensures proactive updates to the Web Center content side of things, or even your portal, help optimize any type of SEO and engagement activities you have in your organization. So if your content server is externally facing with content, or it's driving engagement internally, those email notifications help drive some of those experiences. You can select from existing mail templates or create custom templates as part of that notification process. And you can drive them based on definitions for how the type of experience the notification needs to be for, be it a new document release, like new items were checked in, items are stuck, and gen are done, and maybe items are checked out longer than X amount of days. We use that quite a bit here for our processes, as items might be checked out for several days as we get busy with customers and we have to get back around on that process. The second one is with periodic reviews. You can send emails to users on a scheduled basis for items approaching a review or expiration date, defined by a system date that's already out of the box or a date you add as part of your metadata model. Items appear in what's called a document under review queue, which is accessible via the drop-down menu options of the Content Server UI. And users can choose from the following options, whether you want to take no changes are necessary, check out and revise, and approve expiration. So it's a mini periodic review process as far as handling that content. And the third segments that we deal with are data updates and synchronization. So we call them side effects, so you can perform these actions on any content matching a specified query. Some of the standard actions we have are the update metadata. I can check out and check in. I can update an external database, and I can delete revisions. And I can even resubmit the conversion process after a certain number of tries where something might be stuck in gen dub dub dub. Queries can be performed against the Content Server database or any other external database provided you have configured in your environment. I will tell you, this has been one of our most popular components over the years, and we've used it in a number of intranet site installations to help drive management of that content. So what's new in SubNod? So we're sitting at 5.0 that was released in March 2017, and we basically simplified the subscriptions for end users. So non-administrators can now create their own subscriptions. So you can not only use some of the out-of-the-box subscription capability if you've exposed that and turned that on, but you can also drive some of these queries and get at content from a finance, a legal, even human resources department perspective. Users with restricted access can create subscriptions in a restricted view. So we have type ahead user fields. These type ahead suggestions are based on both username and full names. We have a job run history. You can resubmit for conversion side effect, which is the inbound refinery issue I talked about with gen dub dub w. So the side effect will allow you to resubmit content items to inbound refinery to attempt conversion again. 3 tries, 4 tries, 5 tries, whatever makes sense in your environment. And then after that, eventually send an email to somebody to take action as your environment might be having an issue. Enforce security on a per subscription basis. So previously this was a content configuration setting, so now that's been available on a per subscription basis. And this one is also certified under 12C and 11G as well. So let's take a look at SubNod Live. And we're going to cover basically the rules-based configuration, which is a similar model to advanced user security mapping. We'll show you the periodic review example. We'll do a metadata, I'll show you what a metadata update example looks like, and we'll show you what the job run history looks like. I'll flip over to Subscription Notifier, which is also accessible from the Fishbowl Administration Tools bar. And there are 2 options that you will see in there. One is the View Job History, which we'll get to in a moment, and the View Custom Component Subscriptions is where you manage your rules. So this is the new UI that we have for SubNod. The ones that are bolded, or not bolded or kind of grayed out are the ones that are not enabled, so they are turned off. You can turn them on and turn them off with the Enable button. But there are several in here that will run under different schedules, some on demand that I've set up for the demo, and some run every 5 minutes or some run every week. So let's talk about one of the ones that popped up quite a bit from our customers, and we'll show you a little bit about the subscription notification interface with respect to the name, the subscription type, and the logging level, which gives a little more detail. You can define who you want the job to run as and who you want to be emailed in terms of notification as far as the process, and whether or not there's a schedule that you want to take place with this. This particular example, I am ignoring the schedule, and when I do that, the hint tells us that if you ignore the schedule, that this notification query will run approximately every 5 minutes in your environment. So a non-scheduled task will run every 5 minutes. You apply a query to the subscription query area here, and you can define whatever IDOC script you want in that query to generate back the results that you need to evaluate that process. This scenario will resubmit one of the side effects. It's called resubmit for conversion, and the attempts it will take is 5. Now I can do a preview on the email. I don't have any in my environment stuck at the moment, and I can save that subscription and return back to my UI. And I can repeat that same kind of configuration for items that might be stuck in done. So it's just a different type of query following a similar model of having the schedule turned off. One of the ones that pops up quite a bit as well is the contract or document kind of expiration or renewal. It uses the periodic review model. So of the subscription type I showed earlier with Gen, WW, and Done, I use normal, but on periodic review, that enables a different set of fields that make access to the subscription definition available to you. The first one is all the date fields that might be in your content server environment that you wish to evaluate a periodic review on. You can evaluate it on ones that are out of the box. In this case, we have a review date defined, which we are evaluating the process on. We are running this scheduled job on a daily basis on every Wednesday at 12 a.m. So you can run it on non-peak times so you don't get any degradation in your environment if you are concerned about that. You can define users to notify or aliases to notify under the periodic review definition you define. So you can make it, for example, there are several here. It's a 120-day, a 90-day, and a 30-day, a 90-day, a 30-day, a 7-day, and a 1-day, and so forth. So you can define whatever that model needs to be in terms of that notification. You can define the email template you wish to use as part of that process. And so whatever creative ones you have customized in your environment with the right text and or labeling or imagery you might want in that email. And you can also put text in your message to be appended to that as it goes out. My example here is of doing a simple doc type like on anything with doc type as in the procedure of the title, or the type, excuse me. And I can add to that by simply picking more fields from the content server and defining my conditions and putting my text to add to the query. And I can build a query that would go after content in my environment based on that. I can preview the email that would come out. And so if there are any documents in your environment that match that query, they will return a sample list of the first 5 in that list that happen to meet that expiration configuration I have for the periodic review earlier. In there, you'll get the message text that I pulled from here, title of the document, when it expires, links inside the document to also perform the access to the documents quickly for users who might be managing their email box as a queuing mechanism for items that are expired. There is also a way to define documents that you wish to either meet under periodic review or normal review that you wish to attach. So I can build a query and attach the content as opposed to putting a link in the content, and I can decide whether I want the web viewable document, the PDF converted item, or the native file in the attachment of the email that gets sent out. In that case, if I do the preview, I will see nothing that shows up in here as a link, but when my email gets sent to me, the document will be as an attachment to the email. The last one I'll show you is the metadata update side effect under the same scenarios of the schedule and the email template definition and the email message. I can look for and perform metadata updates on one or more metadata values that are in the content server based on those that meet the criteria. In this case, a simple doc title equals sample PPT. And I can do a preview on that, and it will find a document that it will update the values for these two fields to core processes and manufacture, which is very handy for organizations who don't necessarily do lookups and database tables for managing their values for attaching content. They might hard code them in the admin applets in the configuration manager, but they change every so often, or content needs to move around, or something reorganizes in your environment. You have thousands of documents that need to be touched some way, somehow. You can either go through them by hand, you can archive them out, archive them back in, or you can run a small job with Subscription Notifier to make those updates. For the user who has restricted access to the environment and you want to grant certain roles access to perform Subscription Notifier, so I as a user can come in and create my own subscription notifications, and the one I created for the one with attachments is the same one that I can see as if I'm a power user or an administrator that I've defined here. So that same definition I see as the administrator, but the casual user who has been granted access can only see the ones that they own. What the job history looks like. After jobs run, we do collect the run history by the type of subscription that was performed, whether it was on demand, whether it was periodic review, whether it was ran every 5 minutes, whether it ran every hour. So this user interface allows you to create some filters for the ones that you want to see, either all of them or the ones that you ran that were run that were gen dub, for example, the date and time they ran, the duration, whether or not it's a success or failure, if it was scheduled, and then if any notifications that were sent. And you can page through those results and continue to find the asset you're looking for that you might have had a situation occur in, or you're trying to troubleshoot a problem in with respect to SubNodis. Very handy to play around with the different types of filters as well, so that you can look for key ones that you might have run, because you could end up with a lot of different entries in here, and you want to narrow down to focus on the ones that are key to your triaging options. And that leads us into talking about the third component that's part of the admin suite, Workflow Solution Set. Basically, this is another popular component we have as part of the history of Fishbowl and solving business problems with some of our technology and capabilities on top of WebCenter. And this is basically our answer to fill the gaps that the out-of-the-box workflow has within WebCenter. Workflow Solution Set is basically a suite of components and subcomponents, sample tokens, and scripts that can help organizations take advantage of the Oracle workflow functionality quickly and easily while ensuring a simple experience for your end users. It also includes the following components that you will see if you're going to the component manager, or you'll even see when you're in the Fishbowl administration, that allows for approving with comments, dealing with custom workflow notifications, customizing the workflow review pane, page workflow items, workflow history, release date, search, and the timeout helper, which are all features that were added to the product over the course of time that fit gaps and fix gaps within the WebCenter stack. The tool also provides an intuitive user interface that simplifies the basic content server workflow interface so users and administrators can better see and access the information that's critical to ensuring a smooth flow of information processes. So there are many organizations that don't use workflow, but those that do, many are using them in quite complex fashions, and this product helps enhance that experience. So we have these value-added features set on top of there that provides that ability to realize more power within how the content server workflow works out of the box. Our goal is to simplify as much as possible to the broad base of users and enable workflow within your organization, so you stop with the struggling actions. We can help you through those challenges with Workflow Suite Set and putting digital processes around your day-to-day activities. Many people avoid the whole workflow scenario because of the challenges with out of the box or the impacts to the day-to-day activities. But if you do it right and you expose the right processes and you expose the right configuration and tools, you can make this an easy process. It is built for business users and enabling your business processes. It's also performant, as is the case with the page workflow items. This is also certified under 12C and 11G. And just for clarity's sake, for those of you that might heard about BPM Suite, Business Process Management Suite, and BPL, Business Process Execution Language Workflows, this is not those items. This is core out-of-the-box Web Center content workflow with our components on top of that. So let's step into some of the features, some of the pieces that are involved in that. And the first one is Approve with Comments. This is a nice handy feature that was added years ago when we found out that the approving and injecting with comments is a key element to the whole workflow process. So after selecting Approve in the workflow review for a content item, you're basically presented with an approval page where you can then add any comments before finalizing approval. There is a limited amount of space, but there's a reasonable amount of space for you to put a nice message, a paragraph or two on the approval process and reason for approving. The comments can be viewed for a released content item at any time within the workflow history page, which I'll show in the demo. The custom workflow notification. This component provides a template which can be used to customize workflow notifications based on specified workflow step, content type, or other condition as a result of your workflow process. When an item enters a workflow step, the customized email notification will be sent to all users that are reviewers of that step. The email message can be customized with any combination of IDOC script or HTML to provide links, security links, imagery, and additional text, and maybe contextual text around the email that might go out. Next is the customized workflow review frames. And these are one of the more handy features of the whole workflow review process and allows for an easy customization of that workflow review frame that you see when you're going through the approval process with the out-of-the-box workflow review step. It enables the administrators to hide any of the links in the workflow review frame based on the document's extension, the workflow it is in, or the workflow step. It also allows the user to customize the instructions displayed in the frame to help you, contextually aware based on the step you're in, provide the right responses for the casual user that's in the step of the workflow. Many users in workflow are just simply approving based on what they know in a quick review and are moving on from that step, so they're not bogging down the process. Some of the features, you can customize the message text in the review flow page. You can hide those checkout, reject, and approve and get native file links or expose them based on the various steps. Page workflow items. This component basically improves the performance of the web workflow content items and my workflow assignment pages by separating a list of documents in the workflow into pages. It also allows users to filter and sort the items shown in the tables. It basically has results are split into multiple pages. It's configurable 20, 50, or 100. You display columns are configurable throughout the user interface in multiple places, actually. You have the ability to sort by column headings. Columns on my workflow assignment page is customized by the user, and the columns on the my workflow content items page are configurable per workflow. And it allows checked out content items displayed in the workflow on the checked out content page. There's multiple places where you see the results that are coming back on the items that might have to be in workflow, and I'll demonstrate those shortly. Workflow history is another popular element. So after an item gets through workflow, you get a history of that through the course of time as long as that content item is in the content server. This is a huge feature that our customers like and allows for providing an interface to view the actions that they have occurred on the workflow even after the item has left the workflow and is released to the general user community for viewing. It also stores and retrieves rejection comments made while the item was in workflow. So as you work up and down the chain based on your approval rejections, you can get comments at each step, regardless of whether it's approval or a rejection. And this updates the content server behavior, which is out of the box, is to discard the rejection comments when an item leaves workflow. Some of the highlights of these features include displaying workflow history on the content info page, stores rejection comments, provides an option to store mail notifications in the workflow history table, display the steps rejected from, not their step rejected to, links to workflow history from the workflow review page, provide an admin interface to configure the columns, and provide a service to select workflow history for a specific revision. So it's a very popular element of working through the whole workflow process, is as you work through and finalize that, you want to see what revision that content item has been through and what the workflow history was as a result of that. Next is the workflow release date. That next component is basically allows us to update the release date of the content item to the date and time when the document was released from workflow instead of the date and time when the document was initially checked in. A new metadata field called original in date is created, and the initial check-in date and time are stored there. Basically, the features of this component are it updates the D-inline date for items released from workflow prior to indexing if the existing D-inline date occurred in the past, and stores the original D-inline date in a new metadata field called X-original in date. The metadata field X-original in date is automatically updated and populated for content. It is not enabled on the user interface by default. If you want this field to be viewable to users, you can enable it through the configuration manager in the admin applets. Just load that up and then apply that to the right profile rules you wish to enable that value on. Workflow search. One of the common problems we saw early on with workflow was I can't tell what's in workflow. I don't know where this content item is, and I like to search items in content workflow to see where things are at so I can find them. It's a handy component that's been developed over the years and allows users to search for a document in a workflow by content ID or title without needing to know which workflow or which step the document is in. So if you have an organization of dozens and dozens of workflows which contains multiple steps, it would be difficult to find an asset. So it allows for searching for documents in the workflow based on configured metadata values, providing user interface columns, separates results into pages, displays the number of days a document has been in a particular step, displays a list of remaining reviewers, adds links to common workflow actions, and provides a link to printer-friendly results table. And then you can export that to Excel if you'd like. And lastly, the workflow timeout helper component allows a user to set a timeout limit for a given workflow step, which will resend the workflow review notification email to all reviewers of the step. We all know that people are busy and it takes several notifications to finally prompt action in many cases. I'm as guilty as anyone, and this will get people's attention to facilitate taking action in a more timely manner. So let's take a look at what we'll demonstrate here quickly. We'll show you an ad hoc workflow and the approve or reject comments, the workflow review page and the configuration options, and the workflow history. So I'll take you to a piece of content that I've been working with, and this is a PowerPoint presentation which shows the workflow history. And I will check this out. And delete it in a moment. Okay. So there's the example. And then I'm going to check this right back in, assuming I took a little while to make my changes. It's a simple profile with some basic data on it. And it's basically just a document I'm checking, in this case a PowerPoint. But the workflow is basically a three-step ad hoc workflow. This workflow has been configured so that it will work with one or more of the values being entered, and some can be skipped. So in this example, I have one step where two people can approve it on the first step, and the third step is one person who approves it. They're actually different individuals. I'll pick the document off the system, check it back in, and then our system is using a product called Duplicate File Checker, which is validating that I'm not duplicating too much of what I'm checking into my environment, and then it's off and running. So I can then flip over to my active workflows, and this active workflow is the one called Ad Hoc, and it shows me that my item is in GenWW and going through the conversion process, and it is in the first workflow step. In this case, I am not the approver of that item. But if I flip over to my other user, I can see that under my workflow assignments, I will see values from my workflow queue. And here's where we'll start seeing features of workflow solution step popping up in these sortable columns, as well as filtering to look for items in this column. In case I have a long list of items in my workflow, I can configure different values to add to my display. Simply dragging and dropping and saving, and it will add a new column to my workflow display. And I can deal with my pagination here, and I can clear my filters if I had any of those turned on. So it's a very simple, intuitive interface for the casual user to work with. In this first step of workflow, if I go to the workflow review frame, I will see the document that was converted over to my right, like I normally do out of the box. Over on the left is my workflow review pane, and there's the instructions. So workflow solution set allows me to define the set of instructions for this step in the workflow. I can also enable or disable these various links on this left side. So as the first step of the workflow approval, as this individual, I can approve, reject, check it out, and eventually check it back in and make changes. I can also see the WebView native and some other links. In this case, I'm going to simply approve it. And I have 480 characters remaining in space to make this approval commentary. And then it will move automatically to the next step of the defined workflow configuration I have that's out of the box. In this case, it goes to the third step. I cannot do anything on this as this user, but if I flip back to my other user, it will show up in my workflow queue, and it is the third step, and I have a different set of columns displayed, if you'll notice, than that other user did in my other browser. I can also look at my workflow info, which is out of the box here. We do not disturb any of that. And I can also approve or reject, in this case, and provide comments. I'm going to approve this through. And it is out of the workflow queue and has now been released. And I can go to the content info page, and workflow solution set allows me to show the workflow history here for the most recent, or for the, the current revision I am looking at. I can click over to view the history, or I can flip over to the history from here. And if I switch to the previous revision, I will see revision 5. And I can flip over to the full list of all revisions that went through the process and all the steps in the workflow at the time, all the individuals who were on the approval steps, and any messages in that approval step. And out-of-the-box content server security does get enforced as part of the workflow process. And I can click back to my content info page as a result of that. There's a lot more power under the covers from a workflow solution set perspective, but I wanted to give you a quick little demonstration on how that tool works on top of Web Center content. Last but not least, we have Enterprise Batch Loader. So Enterprise Batch Loader has been used in a number of different scenarios here at Fishbowl and our customers, and it's the last portion of Admin Suite. It makes up the 4 most popular, most useful components of the content server optimization for 12c. Enterprise Batch Loader has been used to solve various business problems, such as difficulty batch loading content into Web Center, hidden content due to storage and network folders and stuff that's out there you want to get off of your file system. We use it for migration activities, and we've also used it for third-party data and reporting capabilities that people are providing files that need to be stored in your content server, then content server is served up through the content server web UI, a custom internet or intranet page, such as rewards, PDFs, statements, and things of that nature. It easily loads content from other systems into workflow. We can batch load content into workflow on the content server side of things. You can integrate with EBS. And one of the last kind of use cases we use it for quite a bit is that the kind of a smaller contribution model over check-in similar. So it's basically made up of a watch folder. You can perform many things during the process. You can create one or more watch folders throughout your definition of how you might want to upload content to check in a new document, a new revision of an existing document, update metadata, and delete the document. So it's got a very powerful preprocessor for also creating and working with the batch load format file and either adding more data to lookup tables or using lookup data to help tag your information that's coming in. Allows the custom preprocessor to retrieve it from even other data sources other than the ones that might be stored in the content server if you have some master data model kind of options you're trying to apply in your environment. And you can be configured to email an administrator if errors occur. So basically this process looks like you see on the screen. The third-party system can provide the input file that's used to define the metadata attributes about the files that are being uploaded in a form of XML, text, VLF that we can provide the format for. It can go through the preprocessor and create the file we need the watch folder to use when it gets uploaded into WebCenter. And we can take that native file that was supplied by the third-party system or the contributor that was dropped into the folder, and then that content will get uploaded to the content server automatically. It's a very powerful tool for satisfying a lot of issues with content coming from other sources, maybe even out of EBS or even multifunction devices where you want items scanned to your watch folder, and then it'll be automatically picked up and click through a workflow on the content server side of things. So we'll do a quick demonstration on how to do a document contribution into the watch folder. So what you're seeing here is an example of 8 documents on the left-hand side that I'm going to drop into a watch folder on the right-hand side. So there is a configuration file that can be defined per watch folder or per environment or multiple watch folders or multiple installations of EBL. So your configurations are basically limitless. I have a basic one that's set up that will automatically assign metadata as a result of being dropped into this watch folder. So I'm going to basically take these 8 documents and cut and paste them over into the watch folder. The watch folder in EBL will automatically look for it every 5, 6, 10 seconds and then pick up the documents from the watch folder and start to move them into the process. If they are errored out, they will show up in a designated error file that's part of your configuration environment. And then once you get them into the content server, they can either show up directly, but in this case, I have them showing up in the workflow queue. So as part of my semi-manual contribution process, I took these multiple documents and I want to see them in workflow and review them first before I would go through and maybe update any metadata, tag them, or approve them in the workflow step. And you'll notice in this case, I am not the first approver of this. I can simply see them based on my privileges. The person who has the right privileges is a different user who can then make the necessary changes to those documents as needed through the process. So queuing these up through the workflow process is a normal activity. You can also just batch load them quickly with defined metadata as part of the source system, or you can go back and update them later on. I think that does it for my portion of the demonstration. Jason, I will turn it back over to you and we will set the presentation back up.
Awesome. Thanks, Terry. A lot of great information covered today. Thanks for sticking with us. Obviously, we did go over our allotted hour of time, but hopefully you found from a very comprehensive perspective, we've covered some ways that you can enhance the core capabilities of your Oracle WebCenter content system. So we started off talking about advanced user security mapping, which we like to call awesome. Really helps you provide the necessary value-add security capabilities to secure content and ensure expedited access to content for users through rules and a rules interface that you can use to create those mappings between your Active Directory or user directory into WebCenter, as well as making sure that the content that is in the system is proactively managed and surfaced to the people that need it to do their jobs, both from a check-in perspective where certain assets get checked in and users get immediately notified that that item's available, or on more of a predictive standpoint where over time, you know that content items are going to expire and you want to review them at certain intervals, 90, 60, and 30 days out. On the workflow side, again, just making it easier to not only leverage workflows, but get more workflow functionality and capabilities out of the core workflow engine that's available. Really enabling those business processes to flow by taking advantage of that workflow capability and then adding some additional functionality like the full audit history and the customizing of the email and the workflow review frames. And lastly, with Enterprise Batch Loader, it's really ensuring that all the content that exists in your organization can be managed effectively within one system, and that system being WebCenter. So the last product covered Enterprise Batch Loader. Jerry showed a demo where there's some content out in a watch folder, easily can be checked into the system, entered into workflow, and end up as managed content within WebCenter where it can be found by key stakeholders. There weren't any questions submitted, so if you do have questions, you can email us directly or find us on the web from a contact form perspective, and check out our blog. So once we have the recording available, every registrant will get an email with a link to that recording. And then please check our blog and website for upcoming webinars. We are going to be kicking off a series of webinars over the next few months. From now until the end of the year, basically, we are having webinars on various topics each month throughout the rest of the year. So with that, we're going to sign off. Again, this is Jason Lehman, and on behalf of Jerry Aber, I'd like to thank you for attending today, and we wish you all a good day. Thank you.